But joining me now is international security expert and professor of political science at Northeastern University, Max Abrams. Max, welcome back to the program. I wanted to get your reaction to Donald Trump's comments earlier today regarding the success of the Iranian strike. He refuted very strongly these claims that Operation Midnight Hammer did little to damage Iran's nuclear ambitions.
Yeah, well, there are two different views on this. I certainly am of the opinion that both the Americans and Israelis did substantial damage to Iran's nuclear program. That seems to be the position of Israeli intelligence. The Americans, also the head of the IAEA, has said that there's been significant damage. Plus, I just trust the science. I mean, you drop 14 of those massive bunker busters. We've seen in the photographic imagery that the hits were directly on target. Now, you can't see, a huge blast, but that's because the bombs actually penetrate through the mountain. And I suspect that we're going to get confirmation that whatever was underneath or nearby those bombs was taken out. Trump, of course, has a lot of haters, and he has haters even within his own administration. This story has been pumped out by CNN and the New York Times that despite the science, actually, the nuclear weapons program remains intact. As an empiricist, I'll continue to watch wherever the evidence leads. But at this point, I think that Donald Trump is most likely correct.
It's been amusing to watch CNN in particular. I played some clips earlier in the program where the same reporter last week is claiming the Iranians are years away from any sort of nuclear capacity. And then she's saying, well, they've only been set back a couple of months. They could still have a weapon in a couple of months. I mean, it's pick a lane. But Donald Trump's success in handling the conflict in the Middle East has earned him another Nobel Peace Prize nomination. We discussed on the program earlier this week the nomination that came from Pakistan for Donald Trump. He's received another one today from US Representative Buddy Carter, though, Max, I don't think he's likely to win an award that appears these days to be reserved exclusively for the political left.
I've been very happy with Trump's handling of the Iran conflict. He's gotten all sorts of advice, and I think that he rejected a lot of advice and picked the best path forward. There were many people who said that that the United States shouldn't attack at all. There were other people saying the United States should not just attack the nuclear weapons program, but should go even further and to topple the regime in Tehran. I think he picked the best path by attacking the nuclear sites, but also knowing not to go too far. There are many Americans, I think very understandably, who didn't want another regime change war. And in that sense, he rejected the neocons, but he also rejected many of the so-called realists who didn't want the United States to do anything at all. And it seems like that both the Americans and Israelis have done substantial damage to the nuclear program without having American fingerprints on a country that could really go awry. I'm not at all sympathetic to the regime in Tehran, but when there's a regime change war, it becomes extremely unpredictable, as we've seen in Libya, as we saw in Iraq. And so for that reason, I do think that Trump should get a Nobel Peace Prize.
Well, I do believe Iran is different from Libya and Iraq for a number of reasons, but you are 100% right about Donald Trump being really trying to appease both sides of his party here. And he spoke earlier today about not pushing for regime change in Iran. He just said he doesn't want to have the chaos that would bring. I want to ask you, though, about matters closer to home for us in Australia. There are reports that our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, could have another meeting with Xi Jinping. This would be his fourth meeting, but he has so far not managed to secure a meeting with President Trump. Max, do you see the US-Australia relationship as being strained in any way? We do know that the Albanese government's attitude to Israel hasn't always been pleasing for the US, and neither has some of the things that the Prime Minister and some of his ministers have had to say over the years about President Trump himself.
You know, that's a little bit outside of my wheelhouse. I focus more on the Middle East, terrorism stuff. So I don't want to misspeak about that. I'm really not sure.
No, I appreciate you saying that. That is, yeah. We're always interested in how the Americans see the relationship. No, that's why we love having you on the program.
One thing I am paying close attention to is the mayor
I know
race in New
you've
York
personally
City.
been. Well, yes, I want to ask you about that because I know you've been a victim of the rise in anti-Semitism in America on American university campuses. We've spoken about that in the past. How do you feel about a man who wants to globalise the Intifada winning New York City's Democratic mayoral primaries, or Mamdani? Well, he looks set to be mayor. New York City is a very blue area. This man could be the next mayor of New York.
I think that the war on terrorism is officially over when it looks like the mayor of New York City could be an open supporter of the global intifada. He wants to bring the war in Gaza home. And this is just so appalling to me. I'm from the Northeast. We were particularly affected by, 9/11. And it is just crazy that in the city of the World Trade Center towers, it looks like it's quite possible that the mayor could be an advocate for intifada inside of the United States. It seems to me that that's the last thing that the United States or any Western countries need is more extremism, this alliance between the far left and the Islamists. So I think that this is deeply troubling. I think that this is a bigger concern than just New York. I think it's indicative of the direction of the Democratic Party and where the United States and so many other Western countries are going.
Well, let's have a look at a clip from a popular streamer called Sneeko. He explains why he voted for this character.
I supported him because he's the only non-Zionist candidate on that stage. I thought you needed to be bought and sold, but people are energetic. People are tired of the Zionism, and I'm excited to see what he's got. I'm not a socialist myself. I don't want everyone to be a communist getting free stuff, but I think he has some cool ideas.
And I've heard that over and over again. I don't know how prevalent it was amongst his supporters, but there seemed to be this anti-Zionist sentiment, Max, as much as all the radical economic policies this character is putting forward.
I think that it's really problematic because he is very well known for being anti-Zionist. He started up a student group when he was younger in college, Students for Justice in Palestine. And they're not just pro-Palestine, but many of them are really quite extremist. Simultaneously, he calls for a reduction in the police force. And so I would expect to see, and you can quote me on this, I would expect to see a rise in violence in New York City, yes, against the large Jewish population, but even more broadly against New Yorkers. What's also really worrisome is that he is depicting himself as a mainstream Democrat politician. And indeed, the strategists, some of sort of like the Democrat establishment political strategists of Biden and Kamala agree. And they say, yes, this guy is the future of the Democratic Party. He is an important model for Democrats to follow. And again, that makes this a much bigger issue than just what's going on locally in New York. It makes it a national issue and arguably even an international issue with the global intifada. There are so many countries around the West that are suffering from this kind of extremism, and apparently he wants to bring that to New York City as well.
Well, we've seen that sort of politics normalised, haven't we, in the last few years? We had the Squad, and they're as radical as you will see, and they seem to have some of the loudest voices amongst the Democrats now, who are sort of rudderless. So could this be what we expect to see from the Democrats going forward, this radical wing really setting the agenda?
Absolutely. And the one benefit I could think is there could be some sort of dialectical process where, you know, traditional Democrats look at this kind of extremism and they say, you know what, this isn't the party that I used to support. So hopefully some of them will flake off and join what I consider to be the more sane party. I wouldn't even be surprised if some people move out of New York City because, you know, with rising crime and all sorts of other problems that this socialist mayor would bring, it could lead to some, you know, larger transitions.
Now, we are just waiting to hear from President Trump. He's a little bit late with his press conference, but we'll be crossing to it shortly. We're expecting him in the next couple of minutes. Max, what would you see as a successful NATO summit for the president? Does he need to secure substantial increases in defence spending from the NATO partners?
The irony is that Trump's critics have long accused him as being, you know, a Russian agent or a Russian asset, in cahoots with Russia, soft on Russia. And yet it's Trump who has substantially revitalized NATO. NATO isn't worth much if member states are not actually taking money from their national economies in building up this military alliance. And it already seems to be the case that he has scored crucial successes in raising the member state contributions from 2% to the projected 5%. He's sometimes accused of being anti-NATO, but he's actually really good for NATO. And the fact that he is there really shows his commitment to this important alliance.